The honourable member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One of the things I'd like to ask my honourable colleague about is this issue of dilatory motions. The motion prevents all members from entertaining or bringing forward dilatory motions, except for one class of members, which is a Minister of the Crown, for example, or the Prime Minister, who can bring forward a dilatory motion, a motion to adjourn the House without debate that must be called immediately. That is the definition of a dilatory motion. So I'm wondering if my honourable colleague could comment on the fact that this seems to be an inequity in the motion, that it doesn't apply equally to all members.
From the member for Red Deer-Lacombe.
I'd like to thank my friend and colleague for that question. So to the Canadians that are watching this at home, I'll say to you just this. What would you call a government that is able to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, to whomever it wants, without any consequences or seeking the permission of the House? And I'll let you come up, folks at home, I'll let you come up with that answer. I have my own thoughts on this, and my guess is the people that are watching at home would think the same thing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as always, it is an honor to be able to rise in this place and stand up for the people that sent me here. You know, before I get into the substance of my speech, I take very seriously the fact that when I stand in this place, I am representing the about 110,000 people spread out over 53,000 approximately square kilometers in East Central Alberta. I am representing them here in this place. So whenever I stand, whenever I'm engaged in committee, I make sure that it is their best interests that are at heart. And Madam Speaker, as we debate here, Motion 11, the tragic irony of the fact that the government, supported by their coalition partners in the NDP, moved closure on a motion that would limit debate, limit the ability for MPs to be able to fulfill their parliamentary, constitutional, and societal duties. Madam Speaker, there is tragedy after tragedy, but Motion 11 represents what I believe, and from what I've heard already from my constituents and many, many Canadians, it is a terrible demonstration that shows of democracy in decline in Canada. And Madam Speaker, I do not say that lightly. I do not say that lightly because, Madam Speaker, when it comes to the institutions of Parliament, of our country, Madam Speaker, we are seeing decline. We are seeing damage that is being done. And it is certainly, I believe, incumbent upon each and every one of us to ensure that we stand for the rights and freedoms, for the democratic values that built this country. And as I first read Motion 11, I believe shortly after it was put on the order paper last week, this is in typical liberal strategic fashion. They are bringing forward something that is going to contribute. If it passes tonight, Madam Speaker, it will contribute to further democratic decline in this country. And I'm proud to be able to stand in this place to fight against that for the sake of not just Conservatives. It's a misnomer to suggest that it's only that Conservatives are only fighting for themselves. No, Madam Speaker, the reality is that when you fight for democracy, you fight for all voices, all political opinions, all who have the honor, the privilege, and the ability in this country, not just elected MPs, but in this country, to be able to stand and whether it be vote during an election, engage in democratic discourse each and every day, or of course all the way up to us having the responsibility of representing Canadians in this place. Madam Speaker, we see in Motion 11, and I want to go through systematically some of the significant challenges. Because as the Liberals are quick to point out, they say, well, somehow many of us in this place don't want to work. Well, Madam Speaker, they throw those allegations out, but that's a very small part of what Motion 11 really is about. For when you look on Section B, which is the details related to Section A of Motion 11, the first part will allow for there to be the late night sittings. And Madam Speaker, few Canadians would debate the fact that they expect their politicians to work. But the problem is is that the Liberals want control. They don't want to work themselves, that's clear, and this motion confirms that. But they also want control over exactly how Parliament functions. So the opposition House Leader has used a phrase that I think explains very, very well the attitude of this government when it comes to how they want Canada to work. And that's that they don't want an opposition, Madam Speaker. They simply want an audience. I find it really interesting. Whenever the Liberals fail, they say, oh, well, in the name of being Team Canada is often the words they use, or, you know, for Team Canada's sake, we need to simply move forward or skip through due process or whatever the excuse of the day is, Madam Speaker. And it's shameful that they have time and time again repeated those sorts of failures. So, Madam Speaker, in motion 11, there are the first part, many Canadians would look at and say, okay, you know, for politicians to be able to work late to get things done, okay, that's fine. Although I hear certainly from my constituents, and though the Liberals don't want to hear this, that they want us to actually debate bills. They want us to be engaged in this place in democratic discourse. But then it goes on in the next three parts, so B, sections 2, 3, and 4, Madam Speaker, truly an attack on democracy. And then, Madam Speaker, it goes on further when it comes to section C, changing some of the rules. And we've heard a lot of discussion about quorum calls and how, again, the Liberals, they don't want further debate. They want to simply be able to control the debate to meet their ends. And there is no better example of that than Bill C-8. We hear many Liberals, especially, and New Democrats that are now complaining about the fact that it is still in Parliament. Well, Madam Speaker, it is the government's job to manage a legislative agenda. And like so many things in Canada, they have done that poorly. But I would point to the fact, this is not, hearsay, but they only introduced C-8 just before Parliament rose, before Christmas. So they introduce a bill, talked about it. We all knew it was coming. There was no surprises that it was coming, but they introduce it only a day or two before Parliament recesses for 6 weeks. And then it comes back, and then they have the audacity to suggest that somehow when Conservatives want to fulsomely debate that bill, that somehow it's us being obstructionist or whatever their key line of the day is, Madam Speaker. It is an absolute shame, and again, an attack on, and we're seeing a decline in democracy. And then, of course, the ability for the Prime Minister or any Minister of the Crown to be able to prorogue Parliament, basically. Now, it is a little bit different because it would require a vote. But, Madam Speaker, I think that this speaks to the fact that when the Prime Minister flip-flopped on his prorogation promise in order to cover up another one of his litany of scandals over the course of his time being leader of this country, Madam Speaker, he suffered in the polls for it. So now they're using their partners in the NDP to be able to avoid the shame and the political punishment that comes with the fact that they break their promises. So now they are giving the chance for any Minister of the Crown, as early as tomorrow or the next day, to be able to stand up. And worse, I would suggest, is to hold that over the heads of parliamentarians, knowing that they would be quick to use the entire infrastructure of government, which does not stop when Parliament adjourns, the entire infrastructure of government, to keep repeating their same old tired talking points. So, Madam Speaker, there is much to say in this debate, and acknowledging that I only have a couple of minutes left, in the fact that the government did limit debate on the motion that limits debate. Again, the tragic irony of that. But I see how these Liberals, in their litany of scandals, they want to see as little discussion, as little opposition on any aspect of their agenda as possible. And we see that represented throughout motion 11. And I would simply suggest this, Madam Speaker, that it's quite straightforward. And I have in front of me a document that was put together by a constituent. That, and for the sake of time, his name is Neil. So thank you, Neil, for this. There are 15 different scandals, different promises that were made and broken, clear misrepresentations to Canadians that this government made over the course of leading up to the election that the Prime Minister promised he wouldn't call, but remember he did anyways? Well, Canadians know what that is. Madam Speaker, there's 15 very, very clear different that speak to how this government cannot be trusted with power of any kind, let alone the ability to unilaterally control Parliament. So in my last minute, I would simply say this. You know, a Liberal majority government was bad. Hundreds of thousands of Albertans pushed out of work by their ideological games. The fact that we saw a agenda that diminished Canada's presence on the world stage, on and on and on it goes. But what's worse, Madam Speaker, and I certainly have heard this from many constituents, what's worse is a Liberal minority government with a bought-off majority by a socialist NDP or NP maybe, because the Democratic part is maybe not as relevant. Madam Speaker, it's worse than a Liberal majority government because they've been able to buy them off, and then of course with the threat of a confidence motion within whatever their quasi-caucus circumstances might be. And I would conclude by saying this. Canadians are tired of having a government simply repeat themselves, the same tired, in many cases, misrepresentations of the truth time and time again, claiming it's real, when Canadians know better. Canadians didn't vote for the circumstances we're debating here today, and certainly Conservatives are going to stand up for Canadians and all political affiliations to make sure that their rights can be respected within Canada's Parliament.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, when the member talks about the political games that are actually played, one of the things he doesn't make reference to is not only the number of days in which, let's say, C8 has been debated, the fall economic statement, but the number of times in which the government has attempted to bring it forward only to be frustrated because the opposition wants to have a concurrence report on this or that. No doubt there are important issues, but they're always done on government business days. Yep. When they attempt to adjourn debate during government or adjourn the House, stop the House for the day. These are all issues in which the opposition initiates in order to frustrate and prevent the government from passing legislation, and then they criticize the government for not being able to pass legislation.
That's right.
Madam Speaker, that's just plain stupid.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
So on a point of order, Madam Speaker, I believe if you would seek the advice of the table, I'm not sure that stupid is within the realm of what is parliamentary language.
The Honourable Member was not referring to an individual in specifically the Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Okay, well, then I will certainly note that when I call Liberals corrupt, because I think that is a fair representation of not an individual, but rather an attitude. So, Madam Speaker, it's interesting. Here you have them again misrepresenting to Canadians the reality of what happens in this place. The member himself, in his remarks, suggested that there are important issues to discuss. I don't see government members standing up to concur on supply days. They could, but they don't, because they want to play politics. So Madam Speaker, now they're somehow suggesting that they want to play games. That's the problem, is these Liberals will do everything they can to assert their dominance within our parliamentary institutions, leading to that democratic decline. Madam Speaker, Conservatives will continue to come to Ottawa to stand up for the issues and the things that our constituents expect of us, regardless of what the Liberals try to do to shut us down.
I do want to remind the members, when someone else has the floor, they already had an opportunity to ask a question, that they should hold off on any other questions and comments they may have. Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Esquimalt-Sanet-Sooke.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I was first elected 11 years ago, and I was here for the 41st Parliament when the Harper majority government used time allocation 92 times to move their business through the House. So when the Conservatives talk a lot about how this violates democracy, I just would ask them to look back on their own majority government. But my question to the member for Battle River Crowfoot is, when he says the NDP is bought off, what is he actually trying to imply here? Because we're cooperating with the Liberals in order to get things done for Canadians, like dental care, like the restoration of employment insurance and other benefits that are about to run out under the emergency benefits plan. So if that's being bought off by doing things for Canadians, then I'm happy to be bought.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, my father has suggested often that the problem that often ends up happening in this country, where after Liberals have had a chance to demonstrate that they're not actually interested in fulfilling their promises. So my advice to that member, of course through you, Madam Speaker, is be careful, because the Liberals are good at politics, but they're not so good at governing, and are willing to throw anybody, whether it's within their own party or the signatories to a confidence and supply agreement, under the bus when it comes to benefiting them politically. And Madam Speaker, I would simply suggest this. I heard from a constituent here a number of weeks ago, shortly after this confidence and supply agreement was signed, and this constituent said that they'd never voted for me. They were a regular NDP voter. Didn't agree with me on most things, but Madam Speaker, they will never vote for the NDP again because they were bought off by these Liberals.
We have time for a brief question. The Honourable Member Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm showing up here tonight, as I usually do, trying to understand how this place can best function to get things done in the interest of folks in Kitchener Centre and across the country. I hear the member for Battle River Crowfoot is quite upset with Motion 11. And I wonder if he could share with me specifically what in Motion 11 he feels is particularly anti-democratic. What about this legislation, or this motion specifically, he's most concerned with? Thank you.
Brief answer from the member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I do note that the honourable member from the Green Party does have a great deal of care for democracy in our institutions. I did outline a number of the specific challenges that I have, and I have the motion in front of me, but the most egregious of which I would suggest is the fact that the Prime Minister or any Minister of the Crown can at a whim decide to shut down this place, whether that be tomorrow. Although I hope that's not the case. I hope that the NDP will actually have the spine to vote against this. But Madam Speaker, no Prime Minister should be given that carte blanche authority to which I believe is a serious threat to democracy within our country.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Vaughan Roodbridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's great to be here this evening as we enter week 2 of the 4 weeks of this part of our sitting. Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on the government's proposal to extend the proceedings in the House of Commons for the remainder of the session.